Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the course of History of English Literature, New Classics to Date. This is lecture number 23 and the topic of today's discussion is Victorian Age novel. This lecture is part 1 of the series of lectures on Victorian Age novels, and I am your teacher Muhammad Asif Khan, lecturer, Department of English, Kohat University of Science and Technology. Discussion agenda for today's lecture is that first of all I will provide you introduction to Victorian Age, and then we will discuss the style of these Victorian novels. After that, I have given two lists of Victorian Age novelists, and the division is that in the first list I have provided the names of prominent novelists, those who belong to the earlier Victorian Age, and in the second list I have provided the names of those novelists who belong to the later Victorian Age. After that, I will provide you analysis of some of the important novelists. These novelists include Charles Dickens, William Thackeray, Benjamin Disraeli, and in the end I will discuss the Bronte Sisters. Let's start our discussion with the introduction to Victorian Age. We already discussed the history of Victorian Age, and we see that Queen Victoria ascended the throne in 1837, and she reigned between 1837 and 1901. But we see that it is very uncommon that literary moments coincide with the exact years of royal accession or royal death. Here we see that Victorian period in literature officially starts from 1832. But overall, when we see that Victorian literature is the literature that is produced during the reign of Queen Victoria, and it corresponds to the Victorian era. Here comes another point, as the reign of Queen Victoria continued for 64 years. So analysts and the critics of that era, they subdivide that period into two periods, and that division is for the sake of convenience, and the name of these two divisions are early Victorian period and later Victorian period. Dear students, Victorian Age literature is basically a link and transition between the writers of the Romantic period and the very different literature of the 20th century. This literature is in between the Romantic age and the literature of the 20th century modern literature. And when we look at the works of the pre-Victorian novelists, we see that Jane Austen and Walter Scott, they played their role and they perfected novel by both closely observed social satire and adventure stories. So when they were including these elements to the novels, it broadened the spectrum of the novel writing. So popular works of these two writers, they opened a market for the novels amongst reading public. And in the Victorian age, there was a wide scope of reading novels. So it was not a very unusual thing at that time. Most of the people were reading novels, and for that reason it was very easy for the novelists to approach general public. When we look at the style of Victorian novels, we see that these novels, they have the tendency to portray the difficulties of the lives of those people who were living there. And we see that these novels portrays the hard work and the strong determination and the love and luck relation, in which we see that these two things win out in the end. So basically, these novels are the novels in which novelists portrayed such type of situations where virtue would be rewarded and wrongdoers are suitably punished. And in every novel that belongs to this very time period, that has some central moral lesson at their heart. And these novels are not for the sake of just enjoyment. Every novel carries some aims and objectives, and these aims and objectives are linked to the moral lessons in the life. So this formula in which we see that novelists were including these situations was for much of the earlier Victorian fiction, but we see that the situation became more and more complex as the century progressed, and there were many other aspects and many other ingredients that included in the later part of the century. Now we will look at the overall scenario of 19th century, and we see that novel became the leading form of literature in English. That is the most important thing. Before that, we see that poetry was the leading force, then drama came to the front, and in 18th century we see that prose was flourishing, and it was having that capacity that it was including all the aspects to express oneself. In Romantic age, again there is a revival of poetry. Here in Victorian age, novel became the leading form of literature in English. And overall, if we look at the whole panoramic picture of the world, we see that 19th century is often regarded as a high point in the literature, and we see this high point not only in English literature. This was also there in the French and United States and Russian literature. So books were available everywhere, and the 19th century Victorian novelists created a legacy that has a continuing appeal. So 19th century was a very prolific in this way, because we have a number of works that were available there. And now I will describe the list of significant novelists of early Victorian age, and these novelists are Charles Dickens, William Thackeray, Benjamin Disraeli, and then we have Bronte Sisters. It includes Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, and Anne Bronte. We also have Mrs. Gaskell and Charles Kingsley, Charles Reed, and Wilkie Collins, and Anthony Trollope. So these are the important and significant novelists of early Victorian age. Now we will look at the important novelists of the later Victorian age. And this list includes George Eliot and George Meredith, Thomas Hardy, Robert Louis Stevenson, and George Gissing. So first of all, in this lecture, we are just going to discuss the earlier Victorian age novelists. In the second lecture, we will discuss the later Victorian age novelists in detail. Starting from Charles Dickens. He was born on 7th February 1812, and he died on 9th June 1870. He was an English writer and social critic, and he is best known because of the fictional characters which he created during his literary career, and he is regarded as the greatest novelist of Victorian era. Later on in the 20th century, we see that the critics and scholars of the 20th century, they recognized him as a literary genius. And up till now, his works enjoy that unprecedented popularity that was there during his lifetime. So his popularity is unprecedented, and he is recognized as literary genius by the critics and scholars of the 20th century, one of the greatest novelists, and especially remembered for world's best known fictional characters. Now let's look at the Dickens style. We see that Dickens' approach to novel is influenced by the picaresque novel tradition and melodrama and the novel of sensibility. Because of picaresque novels, we see that satire and irony is there in his novels, because satire and irony are the central elements of picaresque novels. Comedy is also an aspect of these picaresque novel tradition of the 18th century. That is also there. We see satire, irony, comedy in his style, and the element of melodrama. Melodrama is a sensational and emotional drama, and it is typically called as designed to appeal strongly to the emotions. So the novel of sensibility is there. Again, emotions and sensibility is there. So these three elements actually contributed a lot of other features to his style. So his novels include satire, irony, comedy, melodrama, sensations and emotions and sensibilities. So these are the characteristics of Dickens' styles. But the most important literary influence on Dickens' style was derived from the fables of the Arabian Nights. And because of that, we see that there were serial novels and episodical novel chains in journals and magazines. So his literary style is a mixture of fantasy and realism. And some other elements I want to highlight here is that his novels have strong autobiographical element. And as I told you earlier that he was influenced by the Arabian Nights, we see that he is a pioneer of serialized fiction. And most of Dickens' novels were first written in the monthly or weekly installments in journals and magazines. And another important characteristic of the Charles Dickens writings is that his novels depicts the social commentary of the English society. So his novels are autobiographical, and he is the pioneer of serialized fiction, and his novels depict social commentary of the society. So his literary style is a mixture of fantasy and realism. Dear students, here I will provide you a list of famous works of Charles Dickens, and these novels are Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, Nicholas Nickleby, David Copperfield, A Tale of Two Cities, and the last and the most important novel of Charles Dickens is Great Expectations. Now I will tell you about the second important personality after Charles Dickens, and he is William Thackeray, born on 18th July 1811 and died on 24th December 1863. He was an English novelist, an author, and an illustrator, and he is best known for his satirical works. We see that in his novels he presented an overall portrait of British society. And the distinct point is that during Victorian era, Thackeray was considered second only to Charles Dickens, but he is now much less widely read in English literature of the world, and he is only known for his novel, The Vanity Fair. So this great man, who was second only to Charles Dickens during Victorian era, is now only known for Vanity Fair. Now let's look at some of the characteristics of his writing style, and we see that Thackeray saw himself as writing in a tradition, a realistic tradition, and he distinguished his works from the exaggeration and sentimentality of Charles Dickens. But we see that some of the later critics and commentators, they accepted this self-evaluation of William Thackeray, and they seen him as a realist. But some other critics, they noted down his inclination to use some of the 18th century narrative techniques such as digressions and direct addresses to the reader, and they argue that through them he frequently disrupts the illusion of reality, because when he digresses or directly addresses the readers, at that time this very event disrupts the illusion of reality that is being created in the minds of the readers. So William Thackeray, an English novelist and author and illustrator, well known for the Vanity Fair, and he himself claimed that he is following realistic tradition, and he is not following the tradition being set by Charles Dickens, which includes exaggerations and sentimentality, melodrama, and element of satire, irony, emotions, and sensationalism. He is just following the realistic tradition, but later on critics, they deny the fact and highlighted the inclination which he has towards the 18th century narrative techniques in which he was disrupting the illusions of reality. Dear students, here I'm moving towards another important novelist of that time, and he is Benjamin Disraeli. He was born on 21st December 1804 and he died on 19th April 1881. He was an English politician, an author and novelist, and he is the one who became the Prime Minister of England. So he is not a simple politician, he is the one who became the Prime Minister of England. All of his novels are written with purpose, and we see that in his novel he has given us the fine study of the movements of English politics under Queen Victoria. He was actually presenting the social commentary of that very time. So as the characters in his novels are created with a view to argument or with some purpose, which is presenting the aims and objectives for which Benjamin Disraeli was writing. Therefore, these characters retain certain air of unreality. So these characters were not that real, because everything was appearing to be written to defend or to present some argument or the purpose. So he was among the first to highlight that the betterment of the miserable lot or the miserable people of the working class was a social duty of the aristocracy. Here he was actually pointing out that how society can contribute, how the upper class can contribute for the betterment of the miserable, poor, and the lower class of the society. So dear students, now we will look at some of his important novels, and these novels are Vivian Grey, Coningsby, Sybil, and Tancred. These are the important novels of Benjamin Disraeli. Now, after evaluating the general characteristics of Benjamin Disraeli, I am moving toward the important group of novelists, and these novelists are the Bronte sisters, three sisters who have their influence in English literature, and they strongly made their impact in the history of English novels. The first one is Charlotte Bronte. Then we have Emily Bronte and Anne Bronte. Dear students, Charlotte Bronte was born in 1816 and she died in 1855. She is the one who brought that lyrical warmth and the play of strong feelings into the novel, and she is often being described as the mistress of wit, irony, and the accurate observation. And we see that her style is full of impassioned eloquence, and her famous novels are John Eyre, The Professor, and Villette and Shirley. So these are some of the important works, and the style includes that lyrical warmth, play of feelings, wit, irony, and the power of accurate observation. So these are the characteristics of Charlotte Bronte. Now let's look at Emily Bronte. Emily Bronte is more original than her sisters, and we see that she is famous for her extraordinary novel, that is Wuthering Height, and this novel contains so many elements of romanticism. It is basically a tragedy of love, but it is at once fantastic and powerful, and it is savage and moving. Both these ends are very nicely amalgamated in this writing that is credited to Emily Bronte, and that is Wuthering Height. Today, Wuthering Height is considered as one of the masterpieces of the world fiction. So Emily Bronte, very realist, original one, and she included the mix elements in such a way that we have the tragedy of love, Wuthering Height, with us, which is now the masterpiece of world fiction. After that, we have Anne Bronte, and she was the youngest member of this Bronte literary family. She was an English novelist and poet. She published a volume of poetry with her sisters, and we see that she published two novels. The first one is Agnes Grey and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. The second novel is considered to be one of the first sustained feminist novels, and that appeared in 1848. So dear students, that is the discussion we did on Victorian age novelists, and in this lecture we studied the novelists of the earlier Victorian period, and in the coming lecture we will discuss the novelists, those who belong to the second generation of the Victorian age novelists. So thank you very much for listening passionately. I hope that now you will be having the basic information about the novelists of Victorian era. In the coming lecture, I will provide you further information on these important novelists. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.